Hello, hello, for those that are joining. Thank you so much for joining us today. And we are getting rid of all the Blue Monday blues and bringing our energy and positive vibes to today. I've already been for a beautiful net walk this morning out in nature. So I am feeling very much energized for this Monday morning. We're just letting everybody in. If you can stay on mute for the moment, please. We're going to be providing some content during the workshop, and then there are going to also be 4 breakout times during the session, and it's quite a busy session for an hour. So please do start introducing yourselves via the chat, because that would be really fantastic, and it will save you time when we're in the breakout groups. And obviously, when you go into the breakout groups later on, it'd be great for you to come off mute and come off, put your cameras back on, etc. You're welcome to have your cameras on. I can see some, and it's brilliant to see faces rather than initials. And we'll just let everybody in, and then we will get kicked off any second now. We're doing pretty well because it's only 1 minute past. But we're getting a few more in. Oh my goodness, I've got some that have come from our net walk as well this morning, so that's even more fantastic. Hello, Rebecca. Saw you about half an hour ago, I think, in person. Thanks, Caroline, for kicking off the introductions. That's brilliant. That's exactly what we need to be doing. Fabulous. So I think the waiting room is now empty. There are a few more of you signed up to today, but I think we will kick off and start the session, because we have an awful lot to pack into 1 hour, don't we, Nikki? So I'm delighted to introduce the session. We decided today to beat the Blue Monday blues with our antidote, which is Green Monday. We've dedicated today to our sustainability community, and we are running a whole plethora of events. Maybe ask me at the end of the day whether that was a good idea to do them all in one day or not. But we're in event number 2, and this one is really important. And in fact, on my net walk this morning, we've been talking very much about how do we make change happen. And we all know, I think, that change is hard, difficult, etc. So I am really, really delighted. If we go on to the next slide, I'm really excited to introduce myself and my fellow speaker today, who's the expert on change. I'll introduce myself very quickly and then let Nikki take over the session, and I will chip in at certain times. So I'm Sally Pritchett. I'm the CEO and co-founder at Something Big. We're a communications agency, and I've been doing communications passionately for about 3 decades now, which means I'm pretty old. And what I really, really see is that communications can be a massive catalyst to change. We're going to talk throughout today's workshop about where communications can help with change processes, but in all things to do with sustainability, I think leaning into our communication skills will be fabulously useful. And so that's my expertise area. And Nikki, with no further ado, I will hand over to you as an expert in change.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you. Yes, lovely to see you all. I'm sort of seeing a few initials rather than faces, which I'm sure is just my technology. Hopefully the technology will work. I'm using a new functionality I didn't even know existed called PowerPoint Live. Right, so I am Nicky Leach. I'm the founder of the Spiral Hub, and I'm passionate and motivated by making a meaningful difference in the world. And I set up the Spiral Hub with one mission: to change the way businesses do change, because traditionally 70% of change programs fail, and the planet doesn't have time for us to keep using the same approaches that lead to us keep failing, and hope that we're going to get to a different outcome. My first few years as a management consultant, I worked at PwC, and mainly the approach I realised over those first few years was consultants sitting in a darkened room, coming up with the answers and presenting them back to the client and saying, right, this is what you need to do. And funnily enough, that didn't lead to lasting change in the business. And over time, what I realised is actually if we adapted our approach to one of involvement and working alongside teams from the start of the project, then actually it worked. They owned the recommendations, because actually they'd been their recommendations. And so when we stepped away, the projects continued. And after leaving PwC, I then joined the board of directors at an NHS trust, where I was responsible for a division of 400 people and a large cross-organisational change programme. And it was by following this new principle of involvement that I empowered my teams to lead change. And over the 2 years, we made lots of mistakes, but we also made lots of changes and lots of improvements to patient experience, to ways of working, to our budgets, and also improving staff satisfaction. So it kind of ticked all of the right boxes. And a large part of why it worked was because we put people involvement at the heart of the approach. And it's this principle that underpins everything that we do at the Spiral Hub, which is all about, our work is all around helping CEOs and leadership teams to implement change into their businesses successfully by working with the people in the business, not doing to. So, as Sally said, we've got a lot to kind of fit into the time we've got this morning. I'm going to introduce you to something that I call the bit in the middle, because for me, that's where a lot of change goes wrong, and kind of what happens. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And then I'm going to talk about 3 big obstacles. There are quite a lot more. I shrunk this down to an hour. But I picked the 3, whereas Sally said, I think there's a really good role that comms can play in these particular obstacles to help overcome them. So that's why we picked these 3. It's a really interactive session. We're going to do some talking, but there's also lots for you to also, we're going to have some breakouts and lots for you to also think about and talk about in terms of the relevance to your business, so that you leave. What we want is a really tangible kind of action for you. So it's short, it's fast paced. We're not going to have time to kind of address all of the obstacles in detail. The main objective today is to raise your awareness of the 3 main obstacles and how comms can make a difference. I am going to share our contact details at the end, and we're really happy to have follow-up calls with people on the one thing, which I will talk about more at the end, because there is the one takeaway that we're hoping you get from this session. When I run, so I have a longer version of this workshop that I do with CEOs, and I found that it really helps to have a specific example in mind for when we're then getting into talk about the obstacles. So the first thing that I'd like you to do is we're just going to put you into little breakouts, and just a quick 2 minutes. What's the most significant change or improvement that you are currently trying to implement into the business right now? Cool, thank you. Right. So we are cracking on. Keep that in mind. So I said I would introduce you to something called the bit in the middle. Let's see if this sounds familiar. So the journey of change. We have a beginning, we have a middle, and we have an end. And at the beginning, it's all quite exciting, isn't it? We like starting new things, and everyone's got energy and commitment and passion. We can do this. It's going to, we're going to crack through this. And it feels energizing and exciting. And then what happens over time is actually you get into the implementation, you start doing things, start taking some action, start making some decisions, and actually it starts to feel quite hard. And actually something that felt like we were all aligned, when you actually get into the detail and you start doing some implementation, you realize actually people have slightly different understandings and interpretations, or actually something that we agreed last week, once you've gone away and done a bit more thinking about it, you come back and go, I'm not really sure. And what can happen is over time is actually energy starts to fade. And it all starts to get a little bit like treacle, feeling really hard. And the energy and excitement of the beginning has faded. And yet the end isn't yet in sight. That kind of light at the end of the tunnel isn't there yet. So you don't even have that to energize you. And so this is what I call the bit in the middle. This is the sticky bit. And this, in my experience, is where the projects and initiatives or ideas, it's all where it starts to fizzle and fade out. And so what we need to do is move from recognizing that, yes, there's always going to be bumps in the road. It's always going to be hard and it's going to be challenging, but it's starting to see the green line and how do you move things onto the green line. And it's when you have this kind of downward trajectory, is you start to turn it into a plateau and you catch it and you say, actually, okay, things are sort of slightly unraveling here, or we're all getting it's all feeling a bit difficult. Let's actually come together and have a conversation. And you turn that plateau, you kind of catch it before it dips too low, you turn it into a plateau, and then you can continue the momentum and you can continue to move forward. And so the 3 obstacles that I'm going to talk about today are 3 of those kind of big obstacles, are actually the ones that kind of head you down on the red line, and that we then want to overcome those to keep you on track for the green line. Making sense? Does that resonate with people? Sounding familiar? Cool. I'm seeing nods. So, and a thumbs up. Thank you. So come on then, let's get into it. 3 obstacles. So obstacle number 1, lack of clarity and alignment. I have this wonderful phrase that I like to use, or term called coddywampler. Someone introduced this to me many years ago. Coddywampler, to travel in a purposeful manner towards a vague destination. And I see that a lot with businesses. We were working with a client last year, a very visionary CEO who knew where he wanted to take the business, and he talked about it loads. Talked about it all of the time. But the problem was the business is 235 people and they're spread across multiple operational sites. So not everyone got to hear him speak. And even for those people who did get to hear him speak, actually, they're all going to have taken away a slightly different understanding, because actually how we hear and absorb information is different depending on what's going on for us at any time. So what that actually led to was a lack of clarity and alignment. And it's not for want of trying. You know, people in the business were committed to what they were doing, but we're all human and we focus on the work that we want to do, which isn't always necessarily the work that the business needs us to do. So for our client, what that meant was people across the business working on different projects and different initiatives in a bit of an uncoordinated way. And initiatives that were important one month, but maybe being suddenly dropped for something slightly more interesting, or, you know, sometimes the CEO did have a kind of came back from something and suddenly thought, oh, he has another new idea. And actually, he wasn't also very good at kind of connecting it to that bigger picture. And so it also led to different messages being communicated by different members of the leadership team. Because again, because he hadn't articulated it very well and it wasn't documented, there wasn't one place for everyone to go to for that sense of alignment. Different members of the leadership team would then communicate things in a slightly different way. So it wasn't always clear what people were being asked to do. And I remember sitting in one meeting with people from different teams, and the conversation was about trying to decipher what they'd been asked to do rather than getting on with the task at hand, because different directors had described the task in different ways. And so there was that lack of alignment, as I say, at the senior leadership team level, because as a team, they hadn't spent enough time discussing and agreeing what they wanted to achieve as a business. Now, the good news is we're motivated by purpose, by having that feeling that we're contributing to something greater than ourselves. And for anyone who wants to kind of read up more about motivation, and it's, you know, the old thinking of carrot and stick, there's a brilliant book called Drive by Dan Pink, and he talks about motivation in the 21st century being about purpose, mastery, and autonomy. So this sense of purpose, you know, we want to be making a difference outside of ourselves and to something much greater. So to tackle this obstacle of lack of clarity and alignment, what we need to be thinking about is setting the direction of travel, getting crystal clear on what you want to achieve and why. And importantly, writing it down and writing it in a document that can then be shared. So for our client, what we did is we had a series of working sessions where he talked about his vision for the business and the strategy to achieve it, whilst we captured it in a document that could be shared first with the leadership team so that they could get alignment and, you know, and make some comments and adjustments, because that's the other thing. It's really important that people feel involved in it as well. But once the leadership team were comfortable with that direction of travel, then it could be shared out with the wider business. So Sally, I'm going to ask you if you share your insights on the role of communications at this point.
Yeah, and I think it absolutely dovetails with what you're talking about here. So I think the first thing I want to say is that what we say is not necessarily what people hear or interpret. And I think there are three really core reasons for that. Number one, we use certain language and we say things in a certain way, and that is not interpreted in exactly the same way by all individuals. Now, that could be because of age and generation. Words have literally changed their meaning over time, and that makes a difference. But also, we might have been brought up in different parts of the world, and that means that we interpret things with a different sentiment. So number one reason is we are not hearing the same meaning to the words that are being used. The second thing is that just because of human self-preservation, we also contextualize everything we hear to our own personal perspective. So to Nicky's example a moment ago, every director that was sitting around that table listening to the same information, they were all contextualizing it for their own department function of the business. And then the third reason is we are very visual. So I think a really great example of this is Harry Potter. Despite the fact that J.K. Rowling describes in infinite detail what Hogwarts or any of the characters are like, we ourselves turn all the information that we process into images in our head, and we colour it in and we paint a picture. And those pictures will be different. So if you talk to anyone who's read the Harry Potter books and not watched the films, they could describe Hogwarts in a different way. So there's sort of three really cool reasons why everyone you're talking to does not necessarily hear the same thing or interpret it in the same way. So big three tips. Number one, take care of your language selection. Test it out with some of the people in your team so that they understand, they can feed back to you what they're interpreting. Number two, bring your narrative to life as visually as you possibly can. Sort of summon up your inner J.K. Rowling, bring examples to life, paint the picture. And the third thing is to really understand people's different perspectives in different departments around the organization, etc. Go and do two-way communication so that you can understand how your information and your change direction is being interpreted in different places, because that will inform how you communicate. So that's my top tips in that area. Back to you, Nicky.
Thank you. Well, and I'm handing the mantle straight back over to everyone else in the room, the virtual room. So, yes. Interactive bit. So, how do you score out of 10 for clarity on your direction of travel and how you're communicating it? So that could be for your team or department, because I'm conscious we've got kind of a mix of people here. So it could be for your team or department. It could be for the whole business, depending on your role and where you sit in the organization. And yeah, give yourself a score overall out of 10. So not for each question, but think about, does your business have a documented plan or sustainability plan? If actually you're kind of on this call today and that's your area of focus of what you work on, to what extent has it been shared with the business? And then once it's been shared, importantly, to what extent does it guide what people are actually doing day in, day out, what they're investing their time and energy in? Right, I was just saying, Sally, I'm not going to ask, there will be an opportunity to ask questions at the end, but I'm conscious of wanting to make sure we get to the end in time to have got through the materials. So any questions or comments you've got, jot them down and we will pick them up at the end, because otherwise I'm going to now carry on to obstacle number 2. And obstacle number 2 is big bang thinking. And it's phrases like, by the end of the year, we will have done ... In 3 years' time, ... Or we can have this new IT system and it's going to be implemented. Or my personal favourite, we just need to ... And in the case of my client last week, implement a new IT system. It's like, okay, but that one sentence has basically summarized 18 months at least of work that the organization now needs to do. And invariably, the change that you're going to want to make is going to involve lots of different people who are all going to have lots of different thoughts, lots of different perspectives, who are all potentially, if you don't have that aligned plan and direction of travel, who are all going to have different priorities, who are all working on different things at different times. So Big Bang thinking makes it really difficult to make change happen, because it can make a project or task in some respects feel overwhelming, because actually you don't know what you have to do first and what way you have to go. And also that what needs to be achieved is such a long way away that actually people think, oh, we don't need to worry about it right now. You know, if that's something we need to do in a year's time or in 3 years' time, well, that's okay. We won't worry about it right now. And it was Benjamin Franklin who said, if you fail to plan, you are planning to fail. Because all change takes time. All projects, initiatives, ideas, they all need some sense of a plan. So how do you tackle change? Well, you think about it in small, planned, incremental steps, and importantly, iteration, because this isn't about perfection. I think I mentioned before, you know, things are going to go wrong. And actually, if you can build that into your thinking and into the plan and allow time for that, then it helps. So break down the work into manageable chunks, phased over time. As I say, don't strive for perfection. It's much better to iterate and improve. So to give you an example, years ago when I was working in the NHS, we introduced a new service into the organisation. And so the way we thought about it, and that involved, you know, recruiting new people, a new IT system. It had to be, yes, it was a team, but it was a hospital at night team. So it literally touched every single team across the whole organisation. So the way we thought about it was in these planned steps and iterations. So first, it's like phase 1, design the service. Phase 2, build the MPV, the minimum viable product for the IT solution. Then the next phase, recruit the team. Next, train the team. Then roll out new software, hand-holding for the first quarter to make sure it worked, addressing operational issues really quickly. That was a whole phase, again, recognising we weren't going to have got it all right. Whilst we designed it and built it, didn't mean to say it was actually going to work. And then the check-ins during that time to make sure we're getting that feedback and that people are feeding back to us if there are problems or things that were going right, that it's like, do more of this. So then actually by the third quarter, it had become business as usual. But by thinking about it in those step-by-step way and putting a plan that had sort of broad phases and thinking about, okay, this next quarter, this is what we need to work on. And we're going to break that quarter down into the month and then in the month into the week. It made it manageable. It took out the overwhelm, and it was then something that everyone could understand and see their role and how they were contributing to it. So Sally, the role of communications.
And it comes so hand in hand. So I'm going to say this one and done, this idea that we communicate once and we say, hey, there's the destination and that's where we're headed. And then we just got everyone just magically does it. That's what we've really got to avoid here. So it's very much about communicating the journey. Now, I'm a big one for name the stage. So as we've just heard from Nicky, there might be different stages on this journey, and it's too overwhelming to communicate the whole thing all at once. So let's name the stage we're in, and name not only the stage, but the expectations, the behavior, what the sort of success might look like for that stage, because we might be at a stage at the beginning where we're all in exploration and we might need everybody's ideas. And then we need to talk about that, because later on we might be in testing and actually we don't want any ideas. Now, often the feedback we hear is that people either thought that it was just one and done, we communicated and then it all went quiet, or that it feels like whiplash, like zigzagging, because 1 minute you're in exploration and the next minute and you want our ideas, and the next minute you're in testing and you don't want our ideas. So name the stage, be really clear on the behavior that you want during that stage and what success looks like to get through that stage. And the sort of next thing I would also just give that little bit of advice on, at the end of each stage, celebrate the wins, celebrate that you're going from one stage to the next, so that we don't lose that momentum and excitement, and that we can kind of go, wow, yeah, we've achieved everything we wanted to in this stage. So yeah, very hand in hand with everything that you're saying, Nicky.
Thank you. Good. So again, over to you. So how do you score out of 10? So how realistic are people in the business on how long something will take? First of all, is it it's just another thing that we're going to be layering on top of everything else that people are doing? To what extent has the direction of travel been broken down into manageable chunks? The direction of travel should be over a number of years. How clear is it on what priority is being focused on at any one time? And then how confident do people feel about getting started? Is there a kind of, really clear on immediate next steps? Or actually, are you picking up that people are probably feeling a little bit overwhelmed in the business? And then what phrase best describes your business? It's got to be perfect. You're literally, I'm working with a client at the moment who really hesitate to just press the button on saying something, we're just going to make it live and we'll test it as we go. They just keep iterating the thinking all of the time. But actually, we all know we don't know if something works until you actually put it into practice. So are you confident to just sort of say, right, we're going to test and learn? Or are you striving for that perfection? So third and final obstacle, loss of momentum and or chaos. And it can be both, and hopefully not both, but often it is what happens. So what I've found working with businesses, big and small, is that the majority have a really good process for tracking the performance of business as usual. So at a minimum, that's going to be monthly and quarterly financial reporting. Hopefully, it's actually would be a balanced scorecard of metrics where you're looking at various different, people satisfaction scores, operational performance, quality. You'll have all these different metrics. I'm sure you're all very familiar with in your business as usual. Yeah, you're seeing these reports, you're talking about them on a regular basis. But what very few businesses have is a process for tracking the performance of change projects and initiatives. How many of you have been asked to work on something new and before long it stops being discussed, or you're working in the business and there's the next big idea and the next priority that you've got to work on? It's like, yeah, but you asked me to work on this one, so but we're not talking about that one anymore. It's like the next one. And if you take sustainability, which is a lot of what the focus is today, it's such a large agenda touching all parts of the business. It is very easy to start lots and lots of things and get very little finished. And in my experience, when you start lots of things, actually you don't have the headspace to finish something, because finishing things doesn't actually mean you have to sit down as a team of people and have a conversation and agree what it is you're going to be doing. And that it does take up time to make sure you get that alignment. So you add that to the fact that as humans that we love starting new things because they're fun and interesting and exciting, that's what our tendency is just to keep starting new things. And as I talked about before, the challenge is in that bit in the middle, because the day job starts to take over and slowly all of that excitement fades and you're at risk of running onto that red line. And all of these change things that you wanted to do, all of a sudden they're starting doing that fizzle out and fade out. And because you haven't got, then if you think back to that change slide in the red line, without the little wins of what's happening when things get difficult, which they will, progress slows down and people start to get really despondent, and then you do get to that fizzle out. So even if you have determined completer finishers in your teams, which you will have, the reality is change takes time. Research by UCL, University College London, found that it takes 66 days to form a new habit. So scale that up by the number of people in your business, and that's a lot of days. And so that's why change takes a lot longer than we want it to. So it's really important that you establish and maintain a rhythm in the same way that you do for the performance of the business today, that you also think about that for your change programs or your change projects. I love the phrase, what interests my boss fascinates me. So it's absolutely critical that you put in check-ins and regular progress reviews. So that demonstrates that it's important to you as the leader, and that also therefore people know, yes, they've still got to be working on it. And so that you are having those checks. And what that looks like is going to vary depending on the size of the business you're in, and also what you're working on and how close you might be to go live. So for example, what this looked like with one of my clients I worked with a couple of years ago, it was a 75-person business. They were close to go live with a new IT system, and it had lots of different teams working on it, but all within silos. So the rhythm that we set up was there was one implementation project team that had a representative from each of the operational teams. And because we were close to go live, they met weekly and with a standing agenda. What that looked like when I was running the logistics division in the NHS, where we were on a 3-year change program, that actually had quarterly away days and check-ins, and then with a mid-quarter sort of check that there weren't any issues that were happening, so we weren't waiting 3 months to find out. But it was a much slower pace, because it could be, because we were working on it over 3 years. But the important thing in here is to think about what process are you putting in place so that you can maintain visibility of progress, both for yourself as the leader, but for your team, so that they know what's happening, and that you also have a mechanism for then unblocking issues, which you are going to. All change projects have issues, so how are you helping to unblock those? And you do that, and it will help you to stay on the green line. So Sally, the role of communications.
Yeah, and I think that's excellent rhythm, and we need to carry that rhythm through into our communications. So one of the things that we need to be doing while we're setting up that sort of rhythm of, okay, we're going to meet these different teams at weekly times, and we're going to have, a weekly status or whatever it might be, and representatives from around the business, is also commit at the beginning of a project to how we're going to communicate. And then we need to keep that consistency and rhythm throughout the whole process. So whether that's a quarterly address or town hall or something from the CEO, and then there's going to be a monthly newsletter, or there's going to be a particular way of communicating it in a Teams channel or something like that from a department level, work out that comms strategy and system and momentum and rhythm at the beginning, and then stick to it like glue, because unfortunately the consistency of our comms also starts to fade as the project does, and that's a real problem. The second piece of advice that I'm going to give is commit to communicating the good, the bad, and the ugly. There are going to be parts of this project that go adrift or aren't so successful, and guess what? We're not very good at communicating bad news within an organization. We try to bury the bad news and just keep on with that sort of sometimes overly optimistic positive communication. But when something goes into a black hole, then people go, oh yeah, that's just not important anymore. And it might be still very important, but it hasn't remained on track. So let's just be honest about that. And then the third thing that's really important, and I want to say, get your hierarchy and your language right, because change programs are naturally there and they evolve, and therefore what happens is that the language evolves. So a project sometimes starts with a slightly obscure name because nobody really knows what's going to be fully involved. It might be a sustainability task force, because we're all going to talk about sustainability, and somewhere along the line it turns into our journey to net zero, because we've all decided what the goal is. And then at some point further down the line it might turn into into a number of projects, like one person or one set of teams are looking at driving sales of eco-green or whatever, because we've now developed some green products, and someone else might be on zero waste. And this is where the chaos starts to happen, because now nobody in the business actually knows what the name of this project is anymore, because it's become multiple things and different departments and functions are referring to it in a different way. So I think get your brand hierarchy and your comms hierarchy in place from the beginning, so that everybody knows, oh yes, this thing we're doing over here now, but that is part of this other greater thing that we were talking about at the beginning. This is part and parcel of our journey to net zero and our sustainability task force, etc.
Cool. Thank you. So final breakout then, score yourselves out of 10. Which phrase best describes your business? Are you a team of completer finishers and actually you're really good at this, you've got a rhythm, you're nailing it, you finish everything you start, or actually you love starting new things? How often are people reviewing progress? How often is progress and lessons learned being communicated? Again, Sally said, the good, bad, and the ugly. How often is that being communicated, and how often is progress being celebrated? And this is the progress, not always that we've completed something, but progress in the right direction. So again, a quick breakout for 2 minutes, and then we'll go into wrap up and all your questions. So don't disappear. What I'd like you to do, because we do have a tendency to want to start lots of things, but actually I'd like you, yes, I see nods, I'd like you to just think, what's the one action, just one thing that you're going to take from today's session? So what you might want to do is look at the scores that you've given for each of your 3 obstacles and your notes, and think, actually, if we just did this one thing, and it could be that it's a high score, but if you were to tweak it, the impact would be massive. And so you want to start there. Or it could be your lowest score and you think, actually, yeah, that's where we really need to focus. But it's like, what's the one thing that will really help to improve how you and your business implements change? And just commit to taking that one action. And the smaller you can make it and the more specific you can make it, then actually the thing that happens, which I'm sure you all know, you achieve something, that sense of satisfaction then actually starts to build the momentum, and you get a bit of a kind of a flywheel going and things progress. And that would be the other reason, for making sure you're always communicating even just the smallest bits of progress, because that really does make a massive difference to motivation, that sense, actually we are making some progress. So while you're doing that, just going to because I want to make sure I did commit to making sure we left time for questions. So just a few things to share with you. So one is, here are our email addresses. So Sally and I are both happy either separately or together, depending on what your question is, to follow up with you in terms of that one action that you want to take. If you think, yes, I'm really clear, but I've got a couple of questions, or I just would like a little bit more advice and support, then do reach out to us. We're really, really happy to jump on a call with you and talk that one through. So there are email addresses. Then just a shout out. So one of the things Spiral Hub does is we do a lot of change management, sort of bespoke consultancy work, but also we've set up something called Impact Pioneers. I just wanted a little plug because we're currently recruiting new members. It's a peer network for the person within the business who's leading sustainability and leading the charge. And it's to help members move from ambiguity and wanting more knowledge on how they can make their businesses more sustainable, both from a kind of what you need to do, but also how to do it from a change perspective. We create that kind of safe space within a peer group where members can grow in confidence and gain clarity on how to lead their businesses through the sustainability transition. So if you think being part of a peer network is something that you will benefit from, there's small groups of up to sort of 10 members in any one group, and we meet once a month. We have in-person groups and also virtual groups. Then please do get in touch. I'd be very happy to share more details on that. And Sally?
I will do a little plug for the rest of Green Monday. So we are running 5 events today. We've had one already this morning, and this is our second. But if you do want to see what else is happening today, we have a panel discussion later on with some expert communicators during their sort of careers in sustainability and in change. And they'll be talking about how they're bringing people on their journeys. So if you want to listen to what this feels like in real businesses, then listen into that. We have a networking event, a speed online networking event. And at the end of the day, we'll also be looking at ESG reporting and how to bring your stories of progress to life, and the critical sort of role that plays in progress. So yeah, do use the QR code and join us for the rest of the day. And if you can't actually join us live but are really interested in any of it, then sign up if you can, or tell us, and we will share recordings where we can. And that's back over to you, Nikki.
So, questions.
Yay.
And I will stop sharing at this point, so I can now stop presenting. Hopefully that will work, and then I get to see everyone.
Fabulous.
Yes, wonderful. So yes, we now have time, as I promised, for questions, if anyone has any that they would like to ask.
And you can either put hands up, you can use the chat, you can come off mute. There is a small enough group of us now to just for you to come off mute. So feel free to speak up. Yes, Anne, I can see you've got your hand up, which is very, very disciplined. Thank you.
My question kind of ties in with the last point around where you were talking about, have you got kind of completer finishers, or have you got people that go off? The work that I do, I tend to work with quite creative people within very big businesses, and I was just telling the ladies that I describe them as bath bombs. They're so creative, they're fizzing around, and I can't stop them. And they get halfway through one fantastic idea, and then they go, right, we're going to do this now, Anne. And I'm like, but we've not done that last bit. And I get that we've actually just put some progress reports in, which has held them a bit more accountable because they can see what's happening. But is there anything else you can do with these people because I don't want to stem the creativity, but it's how you really kind of get people to continue. And my problem is that I'm actually the same as these people. I'm the worst person for starting a million things and never finishing them. So is there any way can you think of to be able to communicate more effectively so that we become more finishers than starters?
Fabulous. So Nikki, I'm going to hand over to you. I've got some ideas, but I'll definitely let you go first.
Yeah. So great to hear that you've got some progress reports, because I think, yeah, that kind of visibility of where projects are at really helps, because I think sometimes it's difficult, and if you can get comfortable with doing a bit of a red, amber, green status on things and getting people, it's one of the things I find helpful is always getting people to set their own completion dates, and then that kind of sense of committing to the wider team to get that done, and having that visibility is a really good tool for doing that, because yeah, I mean, some people are just not naturally completer finishers, so I think the more that you can make the information visible, even show the kind of the long list of all the other things that they want to do, because I think sometimes people feel like we've got these great ideas and they're not being heard, they're not being seen. When I do planning work with people, as long as they can see that, okay, this is a great idea you've come up with, and we're going to put it on the plan for next quarter or next year or something, so you can see it's there, it's not been lost, and we can only start work on that if when we finish these things.
Yeah,
I think that kind of keeps them on board as well, in terms of feeling that kind of warm feeling of not being restricted. That'd be my advice.
And I think, Anne, my advice here as well would be, you want to harness it, right? And I'm with you. I feel like I'm a creative, visionary person, entrepreneurial, always going, oh, and we could add to this, and this. So hence today we're doing 5 events, not one. Who would do one? We can do 5. And so what I would do is I would create a forum, a talking shop, if you like, for these visionaries and bring them all together and let them have a really excitable session and diligently write up all the notes to that, and then share those notes and those ideas and all that flavour and colour, and share that with your sort of project management or implementation team or whatever, and funnel it. Because some of those insights and those great ideas might be able to fit with some of the things we're already doing, and other things might have to get in queue, like Nicky's saying, yes, we'll do that when. But I think not to quash it, give space to it, harness it, and say, you would be the perfect person for me to recruit, you fizzy bath bomb. I love that, and I'm going to use that. But you fizzy bath bomb, I'm going to harness that. You would be the perfect person for me to recruit to this forum. And then you can get to harness it. Does anyone else have questions that they would like to put in the chat, put their hands up? I'm not sure I'm going to see everyone's hands, but I can try.
Jessica's just put her hand up.
Go for it, Jessica. Thanks.
Yeah, how would you advise dealing with it when there's a kind of external goal which changes quite regularly? So we got B Corp and we were fully ready to hit the ground running, make displays for everybody, for which each team needs to be doing X, Y, Z for their B Corp goals. And now B Corp are changing its standards. So we kind of pulled back and thought, oh, we might as well advise people on what they're going to need to do for the new bit. But the new bit isn't clear yet. So now we're not communicating anything.
Right, Nicky, do you want to go first, and then I'll definitely add into
Yeah, I was
that
going to
one
say
as well.
you could. Yeah, I was going to say I'll do it very short because it feels like you definitely are going to have more of an answer on this. So yeah, creating vacuums of no information is never a good thing, because then people will come up with their own kind of ideas and interpretations, and they'll invariably think the worst. So my advice would be to communicate basically what you've just said, which is, look, this is where we're at, this is what's happening, and just so you keep people in the loop.
Yeah,
always another thing.
And I would agree. It's going back to my comment about the good, the bad, and the ugly. We're going to have to be agile because the world is changing faster than we can generally keep up anyway. And whether it's B Corp changing their standards, or a thing like a pandemic might come along and halt things, or might speed things up, or might impact things. So I think the good, the bad, and the ugly is a really good way to keep the communication honest. And exactly as you say, Nicky, a vacuum, so where we stop talking about something, is a disaster, because people fill in the gaps themselves and decide, oh, well, we're not doing B Corp anymore. We're just not doing that. That's the interpretation that they then have, and of course then sort of gossip and other things take control, and we're not in control of our comms anymore. So clear statements of what that means, maybe another little forum or a working group to go, okay, let's get in a room and go, what can we do while we're waiting for these new standards, or whatever it is, so that we can stay on track. It's a good excuse though, Jessica, because external things are always going to change. So actually this is a good excuse to sort of manage that muscle a little bit, and have a go of responding to something. Any other questions? Nicky, I think our timing today has been impeccable. I can't believe how much we have managed to get through. And I just want to say a huge thank you to you. And please, everybody, use your emojis and your reaction buttons to say thank you to Nicky, who's led this, because I think you were so articulate and you've guided us through that. And I hope you all had some great discussions during your breakout groups. We have obviously only been able to give you a small teaser of what we can do in this area, but hopefully you will get in touch with us and hopefully have a chat with Nicky and I, either separately or together, about how we might be able to help. And for today, I will say a huge thank you very much, dead on 12 o'clock. And thank you so much for joining us, and thank you, Nicky.
You're welcome. Lovely to meet you all. Thank you.
Have a wonderful Green Monday. Thank you very much. Bye.